So I'm going to invite Claire Moody, who is our relatively new Police and Crime Commissioner, and then Sarah will go from there. But thank you both so much for, again, giving us quite a bit of your very busy time to be with SARI's AGM today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for the invitation to join you this morning. As you said, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Claire Moody, and I was elected to be Police and Crime Commissioner for Avon and Somerset in May this year. So very obviously, this is the first chance I have had to talk to the SARI AGM in this role, but I have worked with SARI in previous roles that I've held, and indeed spoken at a previous AGM when I was a member of the European Parliament. So I just would like to undermine the support that, the value that SARI brings to our area, and how important that I think the work of SARI is. And that perhaps also demonstrates my commitment to the remit of SARI, to the issue of hate crime and understanding the consequence of that on people's lives. So, I know SARI has got a history of representing people from very high profile cases that everyone on this call will be aware of. But I also know, and again, I know that from my experience over recent months, as well as my previous experience of SARI's work, that there are so many cases that aren't talked about of individuals who have experienced hate crime, who have experienced racism from organizations in their own life, including, I'm afraid, from policing. So, and again, this work is highlighted in the annual report. But to go to the exam question, as Alex put it, the title of today, I have also clearly in these few months that I've held the role, we had the far right violence in Bristol, and actually the appearance and the widespread threat of that violence across Avon and Somerset. It's the impact of those events have been really dramatic and ongoing. Only yesterday I had somebody talk to me who actually works for Avon and Somerset Police, talk to me about how she had questioned her nationality. She's born and bred in the UK, but was questioning her nationality. And she is a long way from being the only person that has talked to me about that. And it's genuinely shocking that for the first time in people's lives, and I don't know her age, but I'm guessing that she, has a few decades of British citizenship behind her. This is even a question that people are having, and that is the severity of that far right violence. And as Nazir was saying, the way this has been felt through communities is really, really important. Now, I appreciate Alex's comments, because I do actually, I agree with you that I think Avon and Somerset Police really did respond really well and effectively to what happened in August. I also would say that I think the government calling out the causes of what happened in August, of that far right violence, calling it out directly and clearly, and responding really quickly. I think those were key messages as well. And I think it is important to have seen that response, because the reality is, if we don't face up and we don't own and acknowledge those fundamental problems and the growth of the far right in the UK, then we're not going to be able to tackle it and face up to it and respond in a way that our communities need to. It is also about recognizing that long-term impact too, and the need to respond to that. So what I will say, and I'm conscious of the time and that we are running a little over time as well, but what I would also say is that this has to be dealt with, not just, I highlighted the individual cases that SARI have responded to, but it's actually for me as well the enormous value of the advocacy for systemic change, the advocacy for how we make policy change, how we change systems and how we respond and pick up the challenge of anti-racism in organizations, that is really important. That, combined with Alex's relentlessness, as has already been referenced, is really useful. I, as a new police and crime commissioner, one of my first duties is to develop a police and crime plan, which sets the strategic direction for policing over my term of office. Very deliberately, I have kept the plan priorities to 5 clear headings. But I also made sure there were a lot of requests coming into me about things that should be included in the police and crime plan, all sorts of individual points of policing. I did explicitly make sure that hate crime was referenced in the plan as a strategic document. I have also ensured, and this is a part, and I know Sarah will be talking about this very shortly, also that the tackling disproportionality work is in that document as well. And that actually that has to be not just about policing, clearly a big part of my role, but that also has to be, as you know, the work that's been done, Des Brown has led and others are involved in, the work to tackle disproportionality across the criminal justice system as a whole. And clearly, that cuts across the priorities, a number of the priorities in my plan too. And it is an issue that is very close to my heart. It is an issue that I have worked on in more than just this role. I've been able to work on this in previous roles as well. I would say beyond the plan, which is the strategic document, it's a headline document. Beyond the plan, what the next stage of the work that we're doing around that strategic direction is about an action plan, and is around developing an action plan, which will be how we implement the plan. And in that letter that Alex was just talking about, I'm very much looking to work with SARI as well as others around, right, okay, what next? How do we make this happen? How do we keep working on this change? Because it is addressing the systemic causes that really, really matter. If we're responding to individual cases, we're putting band-aids on problems. We're responding because a problem is in place, is happening. And I regret to say that I am certain we're going to be responding to individual cases for a while yet to come. But what I want to use the chance of my term of office to do as well, and support as well the tackling disproportionality work and working with others on anti-racism, trying to get underneath the system change too. So there is clearly so much more work to be done, but I am looking forward to working with SARI about what we can do, and the change that will happens because of organizations like SARI, because of people who are in this AGM as well. So please keep doing it. And I look forward to working with you all a lot more over my coming years in this office. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire, and I think we'll all show our hands again. Thank you for being with us today. And you will be working with us, and I'm glad you want to anyway. But yeah, we have to. There's no way. I always remember when Batuk started SARI, he said we cannot achieve anything without the police. We cannot. We have to work with the police, or we won't get any solutions whatsoever for the huge majority of our clients. So, thank you, Claire. Over to Sarah, I believe now.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone, and thanks for the invitation as well. So good morning, I'm Sarah Crew, I'm the Chief Constable of Avon Somerset Police. So Alex has asked me also to talk about the events of August this year, from a police perspective, how we responded as a service, but I want to do so, I think, within the context of our communities, and to also reflect on some of the learning we should take from it. And to do that properly, I think I want to frame those events within the journey that we're on in Avon Somerset Police, to become a police force that's deserving of the confidence of all of our communities. And so I do have some objectives today. It's to give you a sense of that journey, to spend a moment on what happened in August, to have some reflections on what this means and what this means for our future plans. So I've got my staff officer with me, and he's trying to share his screen, but I don't know if he's
if we can, yeah, let me just ask Ashley to make you a co-host. So your staff officer is Jason Sims.
Absolutely, I can do without, but you might not want to keep looking at me. My slides are not interactive.
Ashley, let us know when you've managed to do that. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll carry on, but within Avon Somerset Police, we've got 5 strategic imperatives, which when we take them together, they make up our strategy to achieve that vision. And that vision is about delivering outstanding policing for everyone. And I know that might seem as pie in the sky and very far away for many people on this call, but we have to have something we aim for. Now, if you have seen, you've heard, or you've read anything about Avon Somerset Police over the last 2-3 years, you may be able to recognise some of those strategic imperatives. Transparency, and I'm thinking about the documentary at the beginning of this year about innovation, doing things differently perhaps than policing. But it's these 2 that I hope are on your screen now, that really came to the fore in August. The first one I think of relevance here is inclusivity. You know, seeing individuality as a strength, respecting each other, irrespective of any other characteristic. Now that applies within our organisation, but crucially in the way we serve our communities. And being trauma informed as well, and that's a journey we're on. As a force, maybe it's an innovation for policing, but it's about really understanding the trauma of those we're serving. And we know that there is a lot of trauma in the way that we've served our minoritized communities. Now, our people suffer trauma too, but we are on a journey here of being trauma aware to becoming truly trauma informed. And as Claire said, we're not there yet, and it will be some time before we are. But you know, there are some significant steps I think that we've made, and they are only early steps, but you know, touching upon one of them, the identifying disproportionality report. We've been aware for a long time that we need to make change, but that report, commissioned in 2019, following the National LAMI report in 2017, and the independent review to deliver that report that was chaired by Desmond Brown, was a real deep dive into the statistics, the policies, the processes of all the criminal justice service agencies in relation to that racial disproportionality, which I know is so many people's lived experience, but it provided for those that want to look away from that real, hard, tangible evidence. Very important report for Avon Somerset Police for me personally as the Chief Constable. And the second, and one leads to the other, at least partially, is the declaration of institutional racism last year in June. You know, I believe that to fix a problem and to make a change, we've got to acknowledge the problem first. Now, that is just the first step. It's the foothills of bringing change, and there's huge change to bring. I recognise that. But it is also part of our journey that led us into the events of the summer this year. Another one is the Colston statue, toppled by protesters in Bristol in 2020 during a protest in response to the murder by police officers in the United States of George Floyd. That was a really important moment in our journey too. I think it's become even more so in retrospect. Extremely sensitive situation again. And I think there were some really important calls made by the police officers and staff that were in the command positions on the day. We had, again, presented with a situation that really has come about quickly from nowhere. There was no strong intelligence that the protest that day would lead to violence or to harm to people or to damage. As a result of that, there were a lower number of visible police officers on the ground. And once we saw what was happening to the statue, decisions were taken that it was not the right thing to intervene to prevent that damage. Now, that could have, you know, on a practical level, led to widespread implications, not just disorder, but risk of harm to people rather than property. But crucially, and I think this was the important and why it's important, to community confidence, if we in the police had put ourselves in a position where we don't want to be, of fighting with protesters to protect a slave trader's statue. Very important moment for us. Another part of our journey, and I know many of them are on the call today, has been our outreach team. Very important part of those strategic imperatives. Our outreach team are a really strong connection with our community. Now, they're regularly going out from the organisation into our community meetings, supporting people into our organisation to help change it through applications to join the police. But they are also very, very important internally in providing us with a vital understanding, I think, and context during times like the summer disorder. Very, very important. Nasir said something about being in the room when decisions are made. I rely very strongly on what members collectively and individually, the outreach team, the insight that they give me. Something else that's really important, I said that the declaration was just a first step, an acknowledgement of a problem. What really matters is the action taking, and that's where our Race Matters programme comes in. Again, it's at the start, but it's for us an extensive and it's a far reach, and it's a very important, one of the most important portfolios of work that we have within the constabulary. It involves working with the community, SARI being part of that, but wider than SARI as well, to develop solutions to reduce that unfairness, that disproportionality. You know, the Race Matters community network that has been established now numbers nearly 100 members of the community who work with us to help us deliver. We don't always live up to it, our anti-racist ambition, making sure that the voices of all our communities are central to what we do. Then there's the training that comes with it. Waves and waves of training, SARI being involved over many years, that needs to continue to happen to evolve our culture and the way that we operate. But allyship is another key work stream. Staff and officers have been signing up since 2023 to the allyship scheme that we've developed to help us become anti-racist, to tackle and call out racism and discrimination, yes, that they see in our service to the public, but also the experiences of Black and minoritized colleagues as well. You know, if I was listening to Nazir and was thinking, well, within all of that institutional resistance, lack of understanding, resistance to change, you know, I hope that I'm an ally as well within, you know, the institutional setting. Our independent advisory groups are also set up to help us tackle issues that cause concern to local people, to communities and businesses. IAGs, in the very specific sense, but in the wider sense, played a really important role in August, which I'll come to. But IAG members, volunteers from a diverse range of backgrounds with a real willingness to stand up for their communities and to be, yes, critical challenge, as well as friends to us, covering specific geographic areas. All our geographic areas are covered, but also covering thematic areas of policing as well. So I've talked about Race Matters in IAG, our young persons independent advisory group, and our women's independent advisory group. We're in the process, we don't cover everything, so we're in the process of setting up our LGBT plus independent advisory group, and there will be more. But that's all part of our journey, stepping stones, if you like. I'm going to come now to what we're here to talk about, to the summer. It felt like, again, the toppling of Colston statue, another important staging post when that journey and where we were on it was called to be tested. So, you know, the attacks and murder of 3 little girls in Southport, remembering Tuesday, the 29th of July, there was a flurry of disinformation, misinformation. That far right extremism came to the fore very, very quickly, stirring up really strong feelings of hate that were bubbling just under the surface and undoubtedly still are, ostensibly aimed at illegal immigrants as they saw it, and Muslims. But I think this quickly extended to all migrants and to all minoritized communities. And that sentiment, fueled by social media as well, started to provoke and be provoked by extreme far-right groups. But they weren't just extreme far-right groups. I think what we saw was very quickly that being extended to quite right-of-centre groups as well. And the disorder that we saw in Southport on one night started to snowball, if you like, very, very quickly throughout that work into other parts, starting in the north of the country, but more quickly. And as we reached the weekend, Saturday, the 3rd of August, we knew that planned protests were going to come across the country, and specifically in Bristol. And again, it was a bit like the Colston statue, a few days' notice, intelligence, public sentiment, media coverage, it all started to indicate, and particularly community intelligence coming to us, that the protests had the potential to turn violent, with anti-racism supporters declaring that they were going to come out as well, to make a stand in the city. And I think this was unique in Bristol, actually, against the far-right hatred. So coming to the actual day itself, we, from a policing perspective, it was short notice. We put out a request for public order trained officers to come into Bristol to help with the protests. Now, to give some sense, summer is our busiest time of the year. It's also when people take their annual leave. August follows a bit of a lull for us after things like the Glastonbury Festival. So it was already strained in terms of our resources. But when we put that call out, we were flooded by support from police officers and staff from across Avon and Somerset, the whole of Avon and Somerset, people wanting to give up their rest days, to give up their annual leave, to work extra shifts, to ensure we were able to provide an appropriate policing presence to safeguard our communities in Bristol on that Saturday afternoon. There were over 300 officers, all mostly, in fact, working on their rest days, who were involved in that policing operation. On the day, as we know, right-wing and anti-racism supporters came together. Police intervened to separate those two groups. We saw it playing out, didn't we, on social media. In Castle Park, the right wing were pushed back on Bristol Bridge. They broke off. They went to Redcliffe Hill, and they were looking to attack the hotel there that was providing refuge to asylum seekers. And at that time, that caught us off guard. There were a serial of officers who were cycle officers without the usual public order training, who for a while, with the anti-racism campaigners, who were protecting those asylum seekers before the rest of the policing operation could get there and step in the way. So that was Saturday. We made 17 arrests on the night for violent disorder, affray, for cruelty to an animal. In the following days, over that weekend, there were another 10 arrests. To date, as we started to pull together to
Claire Moody on earlier.
we arrested 50. We've arrested 53 people. We've charged 50. 39 have been sentenced, 4 have been awaiting sentencing, 4 are awaiting sentencing, and 7 are awaiting trial. Only 3 have seen no further action come forward. We've had custodial sentences totaling more than 50 years. So whilst there was huge response on the day, I think there is something about how quickly the criminal justice system as a whole backed that up with very clear justice done quickly. Our last charge, it goes on, took place on Monday, the 11th of December, just 3 weeks ago, where people appeared in court on the 12th for sentencing. So it didn't end there, because very quickly we were expecting further protests. So very quickly, there were concerns about a second protest on Wednesday, the 7th of August. I think everybody will remember the fear that that instilled in everyone. And I remember on the Monday and the Tuesday, some of you on the call making calls to me concerned about what might happen, and also what would happen when people took to the streets to fight those far right, or to fight against that far right hatred that which we were fear was coming towards us. It was planned for West Street, and in the days building up, I know our officers visited local businesses, communities, to provide reassurance that we were there to protect them, that if there were any disorder to start, we were prepared to deal with it, and to keep people safe. What was really critical here were that, I think, and this is the feedback we've had since, is how regular communication, quite innovative communication, started to counter the disinformation that social media was allowing to happen. So there was the regular stakeholder updates to a mailing list, I think, on WhatsApp of 250 plus people and businesses and organisations. We were added, thank you to the mosque leaders at WhatsApp group, to share information and dispel misinformation, both in the run-up and during the actual event on that Wednesday night. And officers attend many community meetings and shared messages. We're part of the 5,000 plus taxi drivers network as well. That was an important way of countering that disinformation. There was lots of dialogue with community representatives, with local councillors, helping us understand the feeling, and that directly fed into our policing response. We understood that people wanted to take to the streets to stand up for their beliefs and their communities, to stand up for how we want things to happen in Bristol. Again, during this period, all around Avon and Somerset, officers stood up. Every single member of officer and staff, if they were able, moved to 12-hour shifts. That weren't just the people doing the protests or investigating them. Everybody did, me, senior officers included, just to ensure we had enough officers and staff around the clock should disorder break out. We were also required, it's important to note, and it wasn't widely known, to supply significant numbers of officers to a strategic national capability so that they could be deployed around the country to respond to seats of disorder that were growing there. Now, fortunately, there was no disorder on Wednesday in that August, partly due to, I think, over 1,000 anti-racism supporters who put a really strong show of unity on, and I think partly due to some intelligent, culturally literate, I think, and courageous policing by the commanders on the day, because the visible police presence on the night was actually much less than on a ordinary Saturday night in Bristol. Now, that was a deliberate decision. There were a much larger number of officers, but they were out of sight. They were on standby if disorder broke out. But as the situation was peaceful, we didn't feel, and this was the steer we had from community who've been working with, not to over-police it or appear to do so, but to let the community make a strong message about what was tolerated in Bristol and what wasn't. And actually the only incidents on the night were very minor. There were 2 arrests, one for breach of the peace, which someone was de-arrested very shortly after when they were away from the area, and another for criminal damage. So coming to the end, I said I'd try to draw some learning, some reflections from that. I think the first one is that about Avon and Somerset's mission as a police service, and it's to serve, it's to protect, and it's to respect. And that's what every member of Avon and Somerset Police should be working towards. One, serving our communities, helping to create conditions of safety in which everyone can go about their lives freely and thrive, irrespective of who they are. And secondly, protecting people from harm, especially those who are the most vulnerable, and doing so in a way that gives and inspires respect. And I think my first reflection is I'm incredibly proud of the way that we collectively dealt with the disorder in August. Our officers stepped up and they stepped in when it mattered. They worked those long shifts that we asked of them, and they did so in a way that worked with the community instead of against. And I was really heartened as well to see the response of the community to that, and how we came together, particularly on the Wednesday night, to allow peaceful demonstration to show there is no place in our society, certainly not in Bristol, for hate and the kind of far right hatred that we saw stoking the fires of disorder in August. So that was my first reflection. The second reflection is that, in a much more humble way, is to say there is so much more to do. I said we were on a journey. We're still at the beginning. For every step forward, as perhaps we took in August, there are many half steps back. And on Claire's point, I think there will be for some time, because these are institutional problems. And however passionate an ally the Chief Constable is, even for me, working in a wider society where those inequalities happen, it takes time to bring about change. And that's hugely frustrating, I know, for everyone on the call. And I share some of that righteous anger that Nazir showed as well. So I fear, however true, genuine, and determined our intent and endeavour is in this area, there will still be occasions, and there still are occasions, where our response to some incidents won't match and don't match our intent to be the anti-racist organisation we want to be, and hopefully will be in the future. My third reflection is about the people who work in policing and their well-being. And I'm thinking specifically here about the police officers and the police staff, some of them on the call, who are Black or in minority groups. I think about how difficult, how terrifying, how traumatic it was for them, particularly those who were in visible uniform roles, to come into work during that time as a member of the police force, but also to be the target of such racist hate directed towards them. They carried both burdens, I think. And I reflect that we as an organisation could have done much more to understand, acknowledge that, and support them. And that whilst I think I did do that, that all leaders at all levels could have done a lot more. And I guess my final reflection, as I think more about the future and the journey still ahead for us, is that outstanding policing, I said we're a long way from it, but it comes about when citizens in policing, citizens who wear uniform, and citizens in communities come together to get in unity against the forces that would divide us. And we saw indications of that coming together in August. And so I have to take some hope and optimism for that future journey, that whilst there is still much more to do, that we have come some way, and there is a hope that we can actually do things a lot better in the future as well when further incidents come to test us.